So obviously you guys want to know where Ram sits on the tier list. She's a solid A tier pick. She has gotten a couple of nerfs on the test server that are going to be reflected during the live build. However, I think that if anything, she just ended up going from S tier to a solid A tier pick, which is still a good operator in Rainbow Six, right? She has a lot going for her. She has a great gadget that does a ton of vertical destruction really quickly and really efficiently. And you can keep your gun up while the gadget is working. So you have a multifaceted approach that doesn't require you to put yourself at risk as much as other characters. She can throw the drone through windows. She can throw it from skylights. She has a lot of options in terms of getting vertical play that other characters don't have. She also has really solid weaponry. She has an R4C that you can put scopes on. She did get the can openers taken away, which I think is a fair nerf because with those can openers, she was very powerful. The only issue with Ram is that she has a 3 armor. And even then, I don't think that's really as much of an issue as it used to be, considering that you're going to be taking so many gunfights in the current meta that it's nice to have just a little bit more wiggle room in terms of the amount of engagements you can take. In some ways, you could say that the armor is a buff. However, you will be making a lot of noise on attack, which is a bit of an issue. It's a bigger issue than, say, for defenders. In my opinion, if you play your cards right and you play off of your team and you have good positioning, you can mitigate the disadvantage of that 3 armor rating. So it's not the end of the world. She has really good guns. She has great utility. She just has a lot of things that she brings to her team. And she's a solid A tier pick, although she's not going to be used in every single scenario at S tier. Next up is Ace. There's really not a lot to say here. He is the premier hard breacher in the game. He can throw hard breach from a distance safely. He won't get C4'd. The only disadvantage, of course, is that the actual charges themselves can be shot or impacted below. If you have map control and you're playing off your team and everybody's on the same page as you, you can get the wall open pretty much 90% of the time if you get the utility off and do your job right. The other cool thing about having the Selmas is that he can throw a bunch of them on a wall, which negates bandit tricking. This is a point that I've repeated again and again. It hasn't really changed for a couple of years here. Ace is just the best hard breacher in the game. He has a great gun. He has a great gadget. He's going to be used quite a bit. Next up at B tier, some people are going to call this the mid tier. I think that that word is overused, but I'm not going to get into that. Amaru. Amaru is the timing operator. Your team is hitting something from one side. When the defenders are contested in gunfights, you Amaru in, and then you hit a flank when it's really inconvenient for the defense. The cardinal example I always bring up is a cafe main and heaven split hit. So you'll have your players come in from Cigar. Your teammates will push Cigar and new Balk side over here, right? Pretend this diagram makes a lot of sense. And then Amaru hits the flank up to heaven or cocktail Balk for the window. So that way, the defenders have to take that engagement regardless of whether they want to or not, right? It's not a situation where somebody is repelled on a window and applying silent pressure. Amaru can get in a position really quickly and safely. So that is a really big, that's a really big plus for her gunfighting ability. And on top of it, she has a good gun. However, because that scenario is a little bit niche case, she's not going to be used 100% of the time. So she's B tier. So Ashe is a solid entry fragger. She's not Iana, so she's not going to go up here. I think you can figure out where Iana's going to go. I just spoiled it. So the thing with Ashe is that she does benefit from that 3 speed rating. If she had everything that she has and she was a 3 armor, it'd be really tough to justify bringing her. However, because her guns are quite solid, she can use the G36 with a scope or the R4C. I like the R4C more personally. The R4C fries people with that high rate of fire. But the thing is, with her 3 speed rating, she doesn't suffer from the kind of sort of utility on the other side. And that's not to say that her utility is bad, but it does pair with her movement speed really well. So a good example of how you can get a lot of leverage out of your Ashe charges is to shoot the Ashe charge ahead of you and then go into the sprint. So that way you are peeking into the gunfight on a target you already know is there, obviously with a drone. As the charge detonates, you're going to be able to have a huge positioning and swing timing advantage that you're not really going to get with Zofia, because Zofia has to shoot the charge and then switch to the gun. So the fact that there's a delayed fuse on the Ashe charge does kind of give her a little bit more time to make a play in a way that other characters can't do. Now, of course, that is a very specific kind of Marvel movie sort of scenario I've played out in my head, but that does happen from time to time. And at the end of the day, the grenade launcher is still useful for getting rid of stuff like deployable shields from a distance safely, which is nice. Entry fragging in Rainbow Six isn't as, flashy and very ability dependent as, say, other games, but it does work in Ash's favor here. She's a solid entry frag. She's just not as good as Iana. Blackbeard stinks. His gadget doesn't really bring anything to the table, and his guns are not particularly good. There is like that cheese kind of scenario in ranked where you can like sit on the windows on bank or something, and then you can cheese a gunfight or two. And that's fun in ranked. But when we're talking about Siege at its most optimal competitive level, there's just really not a lot of reasons to bring a Blackbeard over other characters that can bring something else to the table that isn't the stupid head shield. Blackbeard just needs a full-on rework. I'm not really sure what to do with him now. But yeah, he's just not good. Blitz alongside the other shield ops is in a really weird situation where it's one of these things in the sense that he can make plays if everything goes according in his favor, but a lot of things have to be done. There's a lot of coordination, and you have to have pretty good timing knowledge of when to go for the play with Blitz for him to work, because in all the other scenarios where it's not going to work, he's going to get slammed. And in the situations where it does work, he can get a pick or two. Good example is Elbow for Blue, right? Oregon, that little basement section towards the left of the main door. He can rush the hell out of that and then maybe get a pick or two and really get map control quickly. That's what you want to do with shields. Leverage that ability to not get shot while you're making a push. But that's not always going to be the case, and it's really geometry dependent, so he's C tier. Brava, one of my favorite characters. My favorite character, at least until Ram got added. So I'm going to be playing these two a lot in the next season. Brava does a lot of different things. She's a very multifaceted character, and that's what I like about, that's my favorite kind of character in Rainbow Six, is somebody that can do a lot of different things in creative ways. Brava can deny intel by hacking the cameras, right? Stealing the cameras, gain intel for your team. The drones themselves are also intel gathering devices, and she can really disrupt the heck out of the defense's plans and cause a lot of chaos. She can also help with wall denial. If you get the drone in a certain kind of situation where the enemy is not looking, you can get the devices on the wall that are denying it, so that way you can open the wall. So she gathers intel. She has a ton of intel on top of the drones. She helps with the wall, and she can, create these really, really fun and interesting X Factor situations for your push by getting rid of stuff like Aruni gates. She is a really good Aruni counter. She is a great Malusi counter. Her guns are quite solid, right? The cameras, I actually use the cameras quite a lot. That's a guaranteed 2-shot body kill from most ranges, which is really nice. She is a very flexible gunfighter and like a support hybrid. So I really just call her a flex. She's a very, very good flex character who can kind of do a little bit of everything and sits right in the middle. The only thing that she doesn't really have is explosive utility in the form of something like a Gon 6, but you don't really need that with the Bravas. She has good guns. She's a 3-speed. She has great utility. There's really not a lot that I can say that's bad about Brava. So Buck is at A tier, and this might confuse some people because I just got done saying that Ram is the best verticality operator. What are you talking about? Well, I still think she is now, but there is one thing that Buck can do that Ram cannot, and that is work vertical from below. So he's really good at getting X Factor angles. This is a bit of a random kind of variable you can toss into the ring that a lot of defenders aren't really going to notice or plan ahead for, is that Buck can go below and then cut off power positions without having to take a direct heads-up engagement from the ceiling above. So a really good example of a map where this works out really well is a lot of different power positions on Consulate. This was something that I was doing on the old Consulate, as I would rappel on the window below, and I would get rid of the connector player from below with Buck. Now, that's not as easy as it used to be, but there are still situations where you can basically create another angle to attack from that the defenders probably aren't going to really anticipate. Now, in a lot of ways, you have to be careful when you're doing this because the defenders can just swing off of that vertical that you made. However, if you play it right and you time it right, the defenders will have to move, and then they'll have to take a gunfight with one of your teammates. So he's a very disruptive character who can work vertical from a variety of different angles really efficiently, and he can't cover as much ground as Ram, but that ability to just, go for the shotgun play, bang, switch to the gun, and then immediately shoot is really nice. Plus, his gun is good. The C8 is a great weapon, and he has a Gon 6. So he brings a lot to the table. He helps his team out with a very specific sort of job that I almost ended up just using him half the time as an entry fragger anyway, because if there's not really any vertical to work, then I can just frag out with a C8. So that's the way I've been playing Buck and ranked. I just kind of use him as like a entry frag, which I know isn't probably 100% optimal, but I don't really care because the C8 is so good. Capitao is a character who's really good in the situations where he is brought. And then there are some situations where it's like, okay, this isn't useless, but I kind of would like to have something else right now. But the thing about Capitao that really rounds him out, in my opinion, is the fact that he has can openers and a Gon 6 in addition to the gadget. So he has a lot of different things. He's basically the Swiss Army man of Siege. He has area denial with the fire. He can cut off sight lines with the smoke. He has can openers to open hard breach and make plays in situations that your other teammates can't do. And he has a Gon 6 to get rid of stuff. The only thing that Capitao is really lacking in is the gunfighting department, which even then isn't really that bad, considering that he has scopes on those weapons and they aren't really bad weapons in their own right. So you're not going to bring Capitao 100% of the time, but it's really difficult to find a situation where it's like, okay, I've lost something by bringing in Capitao. And that's what we're going to find with a lot of these B tier characters, is that they're not bad just because they're in B tier. There are just other characters in the game that might, in a lot of ways, be able to contribute more over the course of a lot of different rounds. However, there are very few situations where I'm going to bring a Capitao and go, what a Capitao, really? So he's a good character. Dokkaebi is a character that's been getting banned in competitive circuits quite a lot recently, and there's a really good reason for it. Dokkaebi is one of the characters that I predicted was going to be one of those must bans. Maybe not really a must ban. It's more like a 41% ban rate in the tournaments that I was watching. But I really thought that by giving her a Gon 6, by giving her so much stuff, right? The secondary EMPs, a pretty solid weapon in its own right, the Mark 14 DMR. Just the fact that she can disrupt so much with her call ability to leverage roam clears in a very aggressive kind of team TDM meta. And the fact that she gets a bonus out of her team or herself getting a pick with the camera hacking really just means that there's like a lot of situations where there is just objectively no downside to bringing a Dokkaebi. She has a tool for pretty much every kind of situation that you're going to run into in the current version of Siege. And I would not be shocked if she got hit with a nerf relatively soon here, because the only thing that she's quote unquote lacking in is the gun. And even then the gun is good. So it's like, okay. Dokkaebi just has it all. She is the best flex character in the game right now. The only character that I think is making a case to compete with her is Lion. And the only reason I'm not going to put Lion in that category is because he doesn't have the intel gathering ability that Dokkaebi has with a successful pick. Finka just got hit by the nerf bat so hard that I hardly see her anymore, except in ranked when people just want to, have fun with the gun, which is all well and good. The spear is a solid weapon, but everything else in terms of what she brings just isn't really that useful. There are lots of characters here that can do other things that she can't do. She really is just super, super lacking in the utility department, and that's what holds her back a lot. Ironically, in the TDM meta, it turns out that you still actually need siege utility in order to take the gunfights. So it's almost like a lot of people that are like hyper fixating on that detail aren't looking at the bigger picture. Crazy, right? Anyway, you would think that Finka is up there because of the gunfighting, but she really just doesn't bring much compared to her peers, and that's why she's down here. Flores is a decent ban in competitive, especially if you and your team have a very utility-heavy setup. Flores is good at making a situation where his attacking teammates can take the gunfights that they want to take. You bring in Flores to basically give your attackers a blank slate to do whatever they want in terms of leveraging gunfights and forcing defenders into positions that they don't want to be in. So he's really good at dealing with deployable shields, barbed wire, Malusi, any kind of bulletproof cameras that he runs into. There's still utility in this game, guys, believe it or not. I know that's kind of difficult to comprehend, but Flores is a decent pick in that department because he still just has like so much utility burn. He definitely was a lot better in the quote unquote utility simulator that we had a couple of years ago, but that should tell you a lot about Siege and the fact that when he was like up, oh, that's the wrong character. When he was, borderline S up here, you know, pretty handily in A tier. Now he's kind of taken a back seat comparatively, but he's still not, you know, he's still not on the bench yet. And I don't think he's ever really going to be. Having 4 drones that can blow up whatever you really want in terms of defender utility, aside from the obvious stuff that you can't blow up, is really nice. Fuze is getting a really interesting buff in heavy metal where he's going to be able to fuse his hockey pucks through OSA shields. So now if you have an OSA on your team, you can fuse something. I think that's really cool. I think that opens up a lot of opportunities for him, especially Cafe Skylight, I think is a great example of where you could leverage that. He's not quite up here. Wrong guy again. He's not quite up here just because he is pretty slow. He makes a ton of noise, and you do rely on your teammates a lot in order to leverage that vertical control where you can actually cook with Fuze. The actual process of getting the Fuze charges onto targets below with that verticality does take a little bit of deliberation, and it does take map control. It's not as fun to play Fuze in solo queue, right? Because you might have a plan for something in your head, and then you'll drone it out. And then if you see a really dedicated like 3-man roam clear by people just running around playing Call of Duty, if you don't have the teammates that are gonna do the really consolidated roam clear and make sure you get the map control that you need, you're probably not gonna be able to get that much leverage out of Fuze, because you're gonna like 1v3 into a lion's den making a ton of noise. And yeah, you have an AK-12, but it's just really difficult to do. So just because of that, he is a little bit more team reliant just because he is so slow and he makes a ton of noise. And he can't really do the same thing as Ram, where it's like Ram is a lot more self-sufficient and she kind of balances out the fact that she is a 3 armor because of that. Fuze has a lot of opportunities where he can get flanked because his gun is not up. So that is kind of a knock on him, but he still does have like a pretty decent amount of explosive utility in a lot of different facets, and his AK-12 is a good weapon, so I wouldn't write him off. Glaz. The smoke plant is still a viable plant. There are some situations where, especially with Ying, if you don't ban Ying and you bring smokes, you can have a very chaotic scenario where you can get a plant down without even being heard in some instances. Especially with Ram, with her gadget making so much noise, Glaz can really help out with the confusion meta, which is what we were calling it during the play session for heavy metal upcoming before the actual patch dropped. The thing with Glaz is that, yeah, he is kind of a niche case scenario character, but he is so good at that, and it doesn't really take a lot in terms of your individual play in order to make that strategy work. So it's relatively easy to do. And he is a solid flank watch in his own right because of that scope. I know a lot of people tend to write off any kind of scope weapons now because we want to have a lot of flexibility in terms of our engagements. Holding an angle is still something that is useful given the right context. There are situations, especially on Chalet Basement, where the angles are so long that you can get leverage out of that. So that is something to consider. Don't peek a Glaz, especially if smokes are up. You want to bring a Warden. And if Glaz is on the board and you don't have a Warden, that's tough. Gridlock is a solid ranked operator. She has a really good gun with the F90. She has a Gon 6. Her gadget is really good at disrupting things. It has a ton of use case scenarios. You can use it, relatively well for flank watch. I wouldn't necessarily recommend Gridlock over a Nomad for that, flank denial, because Nomad is better at that. However, Gridlock is better than nothing in that department. She's really good for site executes too. With the smokes, when you are going for the actual site hit, you get the shotgun vertical or the breach and charge vertical, however you want to do it. If you have a way to get smoke grenades on site, plus the track stingers, when you're all said and done, it can be pretty difficult for the defenders to actually make the retake scenario that they want. So Gridlock is really good in a supportive capacity for that sort of thing. She kind of speaks to the heartbeat of Siege, which is that very big brain kind of like, okay, accounting for all of the decision making by the defenders here, where are they going to move? She is a great crowd controlling character, and she has good weapons. Solidly B tier in my opinion. Grim is up there now. He was down here and wow, okay, Fuze. He was down. Photoshop keeps updating stuff. Just a side note, Adobe loves to change things for no particular reason, even though they were working perfectly fine, and then my muscle memory is completely screwed. So I used to be able to just click on individual things like this, and I can move those individual icons. Now I have to select it in the layers panel, which is really dumb. And I don't know why Adobe did that. Anyway, Grim has gone from here, right, down to like his own, a tier of his own, up to here, B tier. And the reason that I say that is because he is able to pressure gunfights onto defenders in very creative and interesting ways, especially with the buff that he's getting recently in heavy metal. One of the things that Grim really suffered from was the fact that he was face checking with the gadget. Now, the buff did help him a lot in situations where the geometry favors him and he can get away with shooting the bees, right, without getting face checked. That's good. But there were situations, especially through vertical, where it was really easy for him to get peeked, especially when you're shooting from above and you're trying to shoot the bees onto a target below. So what he can do with the bouncing feature of the bee canister now is he can go above with a bailiff or whatever you have to make vertical, and he can shoot the bees, and it's kind of like a ground ball in baseball. It'll bounce and it'll roll on, and you can actually get some angles here where the bee canister will bounce towards the target, and you don't even have to expose yourself to line of sight at all, which is really, really useful because it does a couple of different things. It does intel gathering for you without a drone, so you can do it without wasting a drone or getting a face check drone shot on sight. And the bees will work over time. So as long as the bees are up, that defender is going to get pinged, and that position is effectively cut off. And he can do this for a number of different power positions. He is really good at clearing power positions. He has a solid weapon. Grim is a really interesting character right now with a fun kind of variable thrown into the mix in terms of intel gathering and site execution. All right, some people are not going to like this one, Hibana. So Hibana, I'm putting at B tier. The reason that I'm putting her at B tier is just because the aggressive meta that we're playing in, right? Hard breach isn't like quite as useful as it used to be. There are a lot of situations where you can get a site execute going and you can get stuff working without opening a main wall. And if you're going to open a main wall, Ace and Thermite most of the time are going to be more efficient for that job. The case where Hibana is really, really good is for hatches. Any kind of site where there's a ton of hatches, you must bring a Hibana. You can get all the hatches, for instance, on bank, basement, right? All those, the two front hatches, as well as the hatches towards open area on the office side of the map. The thing about opening main wall with Hibana is that it's just really slow. It's easy to get bandit tricked, and it's just not as efficient as her peers. So the reason that she was up here a long time ago was because we didn't have this thing called attacker repick. And there were a lot of situations where it's like, okay, well, if they're going to go below, I don't know if they're going to go below. I don't know if they're going to go up top. So I might as well bring something that can do both of those situations. That's not to say that Hibana is a bad character. That's not to say that she's a bad hard breach even, especially when we compare her, right? People are going to see the B tier rating and think that I'm being too hard on her. But really, it's just a matter of like cost benefit. And at the moment, Hibana doesn't, there are not as many situations where she's going to be 100% optimized compared to other characters. However, she does have a pretty solid primary weapon, and she has a bearing 9. So she is a really good supplementary hard breach. There are situations where you could bring an Ace and a Hibana in tandem. You could work a Hibana towards a different side of the map and do something else. But with can openers, everybody can open the wall or help open the wall in some way. So she is kind of limited to that like specific kind of hatch thing. That's just more or less her job right now, which isn't a bad thing because that is super, super useful. Iana, best entry frag. Frag grenades, great weapons, forever drone / Aruni gate burner. Is there anything else I should say? I mean, there's not really a lot to talk about here, right? Very typical siege entry fragger that just, she's the gun. She's the gun operator right now, and everybody needs a gun operator. Took a little lunch break or late lunch break. IQ. IQ is a weird character because I don't think she's bad. I think there are some niche case scenarios where you can get something out of her gadget. Sometimes you can narrow down a Solace, you can narrow down a Vigil, but it's a very specific situation that's only really going to come up, a couple of times. That's not to say that you can't bring IQ, right, to counteract that particular interaction. She is good for that. If you have IQ on the board, she can pressure those characters. But aside from that, sometimes it can just be really tough to get your teammates to act off of the information that you gather. IQ is a very good information gatherer, right? Don't get me wrong. You can get a really good idea of like where everything is when you use the scanner, how the defenders are setting up their utility, what you can do to kind of work around that. But aside from that, there are a lot of different things that have to happen in a very consolidated, very planned out way to get much out of IQ. And your teammates have to be really flexible. So it's tough to leverage much with her, even though her guns are good and she is a 3-speed. Jackal, a character I'm not going to put super, super high. That might bring pause for some people. The reason that Jackal is not going to be much higher than here is because you have drones. Jackal is good for applying pressure to an uncoordinated and haphazardly done roam. So if you're not playing cameras and you're not playing refrags, if you're not playing off of your teammates, Jackal is really good at shutting down solo plays, but he kind of starts to lack in terms of other things that you can do, right, with other characters. You can do a roam clear with somebody like Dokkaebi, and Dokkaebi has a Gon 6, and she has EMPs. Jackal has his Jackal scanner and a shotgun. So he is really good at that specific case, but then because he doesn't really have much utility, he kind of suffers in that department. He does have a shotgun, which is useful sometimes, but it is one of the shotguns that's a little bit more difficult to use. I know Ram has the same one. I'm not a huge fan of that particular utility shotgun, but however, in the new patch, it might get a little bit more leverage. I'm not sure. It seems like the destruction is a lot better on that particular weapon. So who knows what could happen. Next up is Callie. So I'm going to put Callie at C tier. I like playing Callie. I'm not necessarily the best Callie player. There are people out there that can really get a lot more out of the sniper than I can. I just think that Callie is in a really weird spot because there are a lot of situations where the Callie lance is super useful. And it's not necessarily anything to do with wall denial. Like, wall denial is good, but one thing that she does have that Thatcher does not have is the ability to deal with stuff in an explosive way. She can deal with deployable shields. She can outright destroy bulletproof cameras from a distance. She can get rid of a lot of utility really efficiently from a distance without putting herself at risk, and that is really neat. I don't think that the sniper is really hurting her as much as it used to, considering that her secondary SMG is actually pretty solid. It's just one of those things where, because the sniper has that specific, like, very, very specific, like, niche case usage for lawn sightlines, it's difficult to get much out of her aside from that. So if she had an assault rifle, I'd probably put her a little bit higher. But at the end of the day, I don't think it impacts, you know, the fun of playing the character. I just understand why it's not necessarily as competitively viable. However, you do have other options to open the wall with now. You do have secondary EMPs. So she does kind of take a hit there. But at the same time, you probably aren't really taking as much of a hit when you bring Callie because, well, I mean, somebody else can bring the EMPs anyway. So many people can help open the wall now. It doesn't really hurt you as much if you bring a Callie. So she is fun and ranked. She just kind of has that specific case scenario where she's good at and she's not really good at a lot of other things. All right, so Lion, I'm going to put it S tier as well. Lion is one of the best flex characters in the game, if not the best. The only reason I don't think he's the best is because Dokkaebi exists and she's a really good flank watch. But honestly, I think somebody can make an argument to me telling me that, you know, Lion is better, and I'd probably go along with it if they articulated it efficiently enough. Because Lion has really good weapons. I think the V308 is super, super slept on right now. That thing can free shot most people from pretty much any range, and it has a variety of scopes on it, and it has a 50-round mag, and it has, like, no recoil. That gun is crazy, and the 417 is also crazy. Two-shot at pretty much any range. He has a Gon 6. He has secondary EMPs. He is really useful for roam clearing in a coordinated environment where you are doing the roam clear correctly with drones, with people playing off each other, playing for refrags. Lion helps you out so much. He helps with the efficiency of taking map control so freaking much in ways that other characters just can't do. And on top of it, he's a really, really good gunfighter as well. Plus, he has that ability to get rid of a deployable shield if it ever comes across you. So for all those reasons, Lion is pretty solidly up here right now. He's obviously not where he was when he first arrived on the scene a couple of years ago, but he is really good in that situation. The more coordination, the more team-based orientation you have with your attacking teammates, the more you're going to get out of Lion. So really, the sky's the limit with this guy. All right, Maverick. He lost his frag grenades. That's kind of it. He lost frag grenades and secondary EMPs showed up. So now he's not really, it's like, okay, man. Maverick pretty much just got tech treed out, right? He was super viable at this point in the tech tree in the Civ game. And then we're in this part of the Civ game now. And now it's just like, okay, dude, that's great. I mean, that's great if you can still do that, but we have the technology to open the wall that doesn't require you to do the torch thing. So it's like, okay, I hesitate to put him here. No, Jackal. I hesitate to put him here because his gun is so good. And there are situations where it's like, okay, we can bring a Maverick for this. Like that's a good, you know, X factor, like 5th pick, flex pick. But for the most part, man, it's so hard to justify bringing him anymore unless you're a Maverick player and that's what you do. You just love playing Maverick and that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But yeah, it's just he just fell off super hard. Like there's not really a lot more of it I can say. All right, Monty at B tier. Oop. So Monty is one of the few shield characters that really just, you know, helps his team a lot. I'm not saying Blitz doesn't help his team, but seriously, like with Montang, you can pretty much just put the shield up, go down the map control that you want, and you can go, nah, you can't shoot me. And then you just like, you're basically just there. You're just there and you can help leverage map control in a way that nobody else in the game can really do right now. He has a couple of counters that do work pretty well against him, but if those counters aren't available, his presence is really strong. The one thing that obviously holds him back is his fragging power. So he's not going to be in there, you know, doing a ton of damage. But he can force people's crosshair placements to focus on him specifically, which is really, really powerful. He's kind of a cheese character right now. I personally don't really find playing against a Monty particularly fun. I don't find playing Monty particularly fun. Every time I get a kill with Monty, I feel like I'm cheesing. And every time I do kill Monty, I feel like, okay, like I did the correct thing and I managed to kill the Monty there. But then usually I'm going to get traded out because, you know, if I don't have somebody to back up my refrag, then I'm going to get swun. So I got to kill the Monty and then anticipate the refrag. And it's like, he basically just forces defenders to work with him, right? Like his presence makes everybody play around him. And then he just kind of becomes the star of the show, which I think is kind of, I don't think that's great game design in a game like this. I think everybody should be able to have like a big play, but I don't think that one character should basically get to change the entire like operation of the gameplay loop for everybody on the attacking team and everybody on the defending team. And that's kind of what Monty does right now. I don't know what they're going to do with the rework. He's not great in like 1,000,000% of scenarios, but for the scenarios where he is useful, he does take up a lot of mental headspace, and that's why he is used. Nokk, she had her silent stuff taken away. Why? Why'd you do that? Remember we added this character who makes a ton of noise, and then it completely just like messes up all of those stuff. You can do flanks with sound masking. We're making sound masking a mechanic, and then we take away Nokk's. What's up with that, huh? Like her gun is not bad, right? The FMG9 is still usable. I still think it's a pretty solid primary, but it did get nerfed quite a bit, and it's like, okay, it's not as easy to use as it used to be, which is kind of a bummer. She still has pretty decent utility, which is nice. And she is good for the camera flank thing. If there's a Maestro camera in garage, for instance, on bank, you can bring a Nokk. And you can actually, I think you should be able... You can bring a Nokk, and I think you should be able to actually go through the entire garage without having to wait and like recharge it after the patch. I haven't tested that out yet. But the... you know, lack of a silent step is kind of annoying because it does take away her self-sufficiency in some ways, which was like part of her gameplay loop. If you can coordinate with your team though, and you can get them to distract, then you can make a play with Nokk, which is still all well and good in my opinion. Nomad, you have to use an impact grenade in order to eat the air jab so that you can make the play that you want. So 2 things happen. You air jab off the doorway. If somebody impact grenades it, that already tells you they're going for the flank, or they just don't go for the flank at all. So it's not like a Gridlock where you can shoot it out and then go for the flank anyway. With an air jab, you have to expend some kind of utility in your back pocket to deal with it. That is very powerful. There are a ton of maps, especially maps that are a lot more open in terms of the way the building is constructed, where she can cut off an entire flank by herself. Skyscraper is a great map to bring Nomad on because there's really only a couple of ways that you can flank on that map. There's like 2 staircases that pretty much dictate how people can like go down those 2 lanes, right? There's like 2 lanes on top and 2 lanes on the bottom. And Nomad can cut both of those off like pretty much by herself. which is really, really powerful. So she kind of gets a bad rep because she doesn't have like explosive utility, but the fact that she is such a good crowd controller with just that one gadget really gives her a lot of leverage, and that's why she's still a pretty solid competitive pick in a lot of respects. Osa A tier. Osa is so underrated, man. Osa has EMPs. She can set up a shield, and she is a really, really good angle holder, which is something that, you know, if you can get that on attack, it's really nice to have. The cool thing about Osa is that she's an angle holder, and she can do it without a sniper rifle, right? She has the 5.56 Thermite's gun, which is quite solid, and probably one of the better rifles to use at range, in my opinion, just because it doesn't really have a lot of kick, and it's quite precise. I like the 5.56 a lot. Sometimes I'll even run Osa with an ACOG if I'm feeling, you know, if I'm feeling up to it, because that ability to fight from such a long distance and not get counteracted in terms of a gunfight is really, really powerful. So the secondary EMPs help her open the wall, and she can be used as a makeshift shield character in a way that's not cringe, in my opinion, because, you know, she can't immediately like switch to a gun, right? Or like completely like screw up the gameplay loop. In my opinion, I think that Osa's, you know, the way that her shield works is a lot healthier for the game. Just really, really fun and solid character that can do a lot of different things. She's, you know, she doesn't have much in terms of the destructive side. Like the secondary EMPs are nice, but I think that's kind of necessary, right? Because otherwise she'd be really broken. But I think Osa is severely underrated in the current meta because a lot of people tend to think if somebody plays a more passive, slower style of play, that's not TDM meta. Well, she leverages gunfights in a really interesting way, and she's quite good at it. Sens, poor Sens. The problem with Sens is that they don't have a shotgun. I'm gonna keep it real. If Sens had a shotgun, I would play Sens a lot more, because the way that Sens gets utilized in a competitive environment most of the time is either a part of a super, super complicated, like 5 million IQ planned out strat where they throw the roly-polies and they cut off like, it's a pre-planned, like pre-lined up sort of thing. Or they play Sens like an entry frag, right? They throw the roly-polies and then they confuse the heck out of the enemy, and then they leverage like really aggressive gunfights. That's one of the ways that you can get something out of Sens. Sens is really good at getting map control really quickly, depending on the context. I like to bring Sens on Oregon basement takes quite a bit. One of the things that Sens can do is they can cut off the foot angle holes that are common in terms of different setups. So that way you can get in and you can start making a play in the way that you would like to, as opposed to how the defense would like to take the gunfight with you, which is really strong. The only issue is that Warden exists and people can shoot you through the smoke wall, which isn't good. So you have to do a lot of things right. And it's just, I genuinely think that in order to play Sens, like you have to have a lot of pre-existing map knowledge and pre-existing game knowledge in order to make it work, which is really tough. Sledge, not a bad character by any stretch of the imagination. When the shotgun buff comes in the next patch, I think a lot of people are going to be running M870, which will be interesting to see. A lot of people think that he suffered greatly from losing his SMG-11. I agree. However, his gun is still very good. The L85 goes crazy. You can put a 1.5 on it. You have frag grenades. Sledge is just the no-brainer vertical operator. When every other situation doesn't call for one particular type of character, you can pretty comfortably bring a Sledge and that'll be like A-okay. Because the frag grenades give him a ton of killing power, and the sledgehammer itself, there's very few situations in which you're not going to get some kind of usage out of it. So he's still a pretty powerful jack of all trades character who I still will leverage sometimes, even as an entry fragger, which some people disagree with, but you know, hey, whatever. TDM meta, LD5 go burr. Who cares? Thatcher. Like, can I make another tier? I mean, like the thing with Thatcher is that he's always going to get banned. There's really not a lot you can do. He is a comfort ban. Do I think most people, you know, just kind of fell into a habit during the utility simulator with Thatcher and they started banning him just because everybody else was doing it? Yes. Do I think that a lot of Siege players just kind of go with the flow? Yes. So with Thatcher, it's really difficult to put him in anything other than S tier, right? I don't think that's inaccurate. I also do believe a lot of people will pivot to banning him just because they lack an understanding of how to deal with utility without a Thatcher, which is super ironic because this whole character is like, get rid of gadgets and you have these crutches, you know, fall out from under you. And then he's utilized like a crutch in a lot of respects. You can kind of like, you know, fast track your way to dealing with certain kind of siege mechanics. With and without a Thatcher, he just has a ton of influence over how a setup is handled. But we do have secondary EMPs. We do have grenades. We have a ton of different ways that we can open the wall. Sometimes we don't even need to open the wall, right? So with a Thatcher on the board, it does make opening the wall a million times easier, but you're also sacrificing, you know, picking a bunch of other characters. So while I do agree that Thatcher is an S tier character, and if you're in a competitive environment, you're definitely going to bring him because he's just the most efficient character at his job. In ranked, you're not going to really see that benefit utilized to its full extent in some ways, in my opinion. Thermite, if you don't like Thermite, that's too bad. Thermite's still a pretty solid hard breacher. The main thing that makes him not picked as much comparatively to Ace is the fact that he has to go up to the wall and then manually place the thing and then blow it up. So that's a lot more dangerous. You can get C4'd, you can obviously get shot. But for exterior walls, Thermite is your guy, right? If you have all your ducks in a row, you're making sure that you know exactly what's on the wall, you're dealing with the bandit tricker, right? You're making the job as easy as you can for a Thermite, which isn't really that hard, right? Go up to the wall, detonate it, you're chilling. He opens the most amount of stuff the most quickly. He has a good gun. He has good utility. Thermite is a solid hard breacher. Twitch. Some people think that Twitch is a worse Brava, or some people think that Brava is a worse Twitch. Both of these people are not seeing the bigger picture. So with Twitch, Twitch is better at getting rid of non-bulletproof utility. Brava is better at getting rid of bulletproof utility. Twitch is great for getting rid of stuff like anything on the wall quickly and efficiently because the laser shoots from a long distance and it does so instantaneously. Whereas with Brava, it takes more time. But Twitch can't get rid of Malusi stuff, for instance, or Maestro cameras that are like concealed up. So with Twitch, you're sniping off utility. You're dealing with Capcom traps. You're dealing with Mira. You're dealing with cameras, you know, in the instances where it makes sense to, right? There's really not a lot of situations where you shouldn't shoot a default camera with a Twitch drone. I don't know why I phrased it that way. I'm just talking. But yeah, Twitch is pretty solid. They're trying to pivot her away from being an entry frag to like a fully dedicated support character, which I think a lot of people don't really like. The F2 in particular has just gotten like, if you're running the F2 right now, I don't know what you're doing. I personally disagreed with Ubisoft's approach there to just completely make that gun like totally useless. I don't really understand like having options on the table that are just like not viable. That's why I like some aspects of the shotgun change. I don't like some aspects of the shotgun change as well, but you know, that's neither here nor there. You're going to be able to use Twitch shotgun a lot more efficiently. I'll tell you that. So yeah, Twitch, pretty solid A tier, you know, flex support hybrid character right now. If you want to play Twitch, go for it. Ying gets banned so much and for good reason. When you have the ability to bring a Ying, side executes are just a completely different, like there's side executes with a Ying and there's side executes without a Ying. And it's really kind of ridiculous how good she is at it, right? Like she can just throw these things, like spam for these things and just do the perma flash. And she doesn't flash herself, so she can capitalize on the flashes and then play really aggressively with the LMG. She's just so good. If it weren't for Warden, a lot more people would be complaining about Ying. I guarantee you, a lot of people are complaining about Ying. I think in competitive, it makes a lot of sense why she is banned as much as she is. But I think a lot of people, you know, kind of get fussed on the specifics of how to throw the gadgets, and that's the only thing that's keeping her from like completely like shutting out everybody, even in like low elo, right? But in high elo, Ying is just where it's at. Like she's so good, she can do so much. Just a really, really strong character right now that just completely changes the dynamic of how to attack the site itself, which is huge, especially in TDM meta. Next up is a controversial one, Zero. So Zero I play a lot in ranked, and I'm putting him here not because he's a bad character. Again, I like to reiterate with these videos over and over again that this is not necessarily a qualitative list. These lists really occupy themselves more in terms of talking about how many different circumstances in which the operators can work. So while there are a lot of circumstances where Zero can work, the amount of value that you get from Zero when your teammates are all playing at a competitive level isn't going to be that great, because we have drones, we have other ways of clearing util, we have other ways of clearing roamers. However, in a ranked environment, there's a couple of interesting things that you can do with Zero. And that's not to say that I haven't played Zero in a competitive environment too. When I was playing for a comp team, I would hop on Zero a couple of times here and there just because I was comfortable with the gun. It's basically the comm that we get. Play for your gun. I really like the SC3000. Zero's cams can make you a really, really useful intel network that leverages you a lot of information in a solo queue environment that's really, really powerful. And he has a GON 6. So don't think of him being placed here as a condemnation. He is a good character in his own right. I'm just kind of taking stock of how characters exist in relation to each other with these tier lists. And lastly, we have Zofia. Zofia is over here towards the end of the chart here at B tier. Zofia doesn't really have as much flexibility because the armor rating makes it a little bit more difficult for her to leverage gunfighting. However, the stuns and the impacts are both really good, and her weapon is quite solid with scopes. She's a really solid supplemental entry fragger. It's kind of tough to leverage her as a frontliner just because of that free armored rating. However, she still is a respectable character in her own right, and I like to bring her as a competent and capable entry frag. She is a great second entry frag. She is a great refragger, right? Somebody moves ahead of you, and then you can play for the trade. That's not baiting. That's just a competitive FPS principle. I know that might confuse some people, but that's Zof, right? She doesn't really have, you know, a super crazy amount of gadgetry, but it's just enough for what you need to do, and her guns are solid. This is my heavy metal attacker tier list. The big thing that people are going to be paying attention to is how Ram fits into the bigger picture here. She is a quite competent character that does a lot of different things. Shotgun, utility, vertical, good weapons. Really, really solid and fun character to play. I'm excited to see how she shakes things up in competitive. If you want to see more videos like this, or you want me to cover other topics, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of my ratings here, and thanks again for watching. Thank you all so much. Deuces.